Once BBC Radio Stoke was on air, it was a steep learning curve for the news station to work out what it was and who it was talking to. Friendly though the people of the Potteries are, they have their own way of looking at the world and describing it.
Hey up, how to rate me out, I'm sound, cheers, Doctor Mate. Hey up, how to rate me out, I'm sound, cheers, Doctor Mate. Or will you turn it up low? Hey up, how to rate me out, I'm sound, cheers, Doctor Mate. Hey up, how to rate me out, I'm sound, cheers, Doctor Mate. If you know what I mean, sure.
This is BBC Radio Stoke-on-Trent.
In 1968, the august and rather posh John Snagg and the rest of the BBC aliens from that there London arrived en masse to declare Radio Stoke-on-Trent open. The first problem they had was in defining exactly who, what and even where Stoke was. What they needed was some sort of guide.
Within its 62 pages, this new guidebook to Staffordshire gives a stranger, or indeed many of its own inhabitants, an ideal introductory thumbnail sketch of what is, after all, a large and very diverse county. Staffordshire has, in fact, been called a microcosm of England itself.
Well, Staffordshire's been called a lot of things. The point is, the more you look, the less you see. You can't define Staffordshire. That's where the madness lies.
North Staffordshire, he says, is in the north of England, but in South Staffordshire, it's the Midlands, a point which needs to be stressed, not only to outsiders, but to people in Staffordshire as well.
The whole place of the city in the county thing is terribly confusing, but not for everyone.
The fact is that whilst in the county, they were also in the district, and no person who lives in the district, even if he should be old and have nothing to do but reflect upon things in general, ever thinks about the county. The 5 towns seem to cling together for safety, yet the idea of clinging together for safety would make them laugh. They are unique and indispensable. From the north of the county right down to the south, they stand alone for civilization, applied science, organised manufacture, and the century, until you come to Wolverhampton. They are unique and indispensable, because you cannot drink tea out of a teacup without the aid of the 5 towns, because you cannot eat a meal in decency without the aid of the 5 towns. For this, the architecture of the 5 towns is an architecture of ovens and chimneys. For this, its atmosphere is as black as its mud. For this, it burns and smokes all night, so that Longshore has been compared to hell. For this, it is unlearned in the ways of agriculture, never having seen corn except as packing straw and in quartern loaves. For this, on the other hand, it comprehends the mysterious habits of fire and pure, sterile earth. For this, it lives crammed together in slippery streets, where the housewife must change the white window curtains at least once a fortnight if she wishes to remain respectable. For this, it gets up in the mass at 6 a.m, winter and summer, and goes to bed when the public houses close. For this, it exists, that you may drink tea out of a teacup and toy with a chop on a plate.
OK, so leaving the county aside and which hemisphere it's in, what about the city? Surely it's a case of one people, one voice. Well, we know better. Pity our young BBC bods arriving off the train, muttering the names of the 6 towns, Hanley, Fenton, Longton, Tunstall, Burslem, Stoke, and thinking they've got it sussed.
Audlem, Audley, Badley Green, Barliston, Basford, Betley, Biddulph, Blurton, Blythebridge, Brown Edge, Bucknell, Burslem, Cheadle, Chesterton, Church Alton, Clayton, Crewe, Chell, Dilhorn, Eccleshall, Endon, Etruria, Fenton, Fechay, Golden Hill, Great Haywood, Hanchurch, Hanford, Hanley, Horton, Idstone, Keel, Kidsgrove, Nutton, Lake, Little Haywood, Lawton, Malcolm, Newcastle, Ripey, Shillington, Stoke, Stone, Stafford, Sneydgreen, Sandyford, Tork, Chichester, Trent Vale, Trentham, Tunstall, Wellington, Weston Coyney,
Whitchurch, Wisterston, Williston, Woolstanton.
For the new arrival, there really is a great deal to learn. More than just place names.
And what is true of Burslem may not be true of Endon. What is said in Madeley may puzzle someone from Longner. And this is what makes the subject so fascinating. Local speech is a good deal more than a way of pronouncing English words.
And yet, the fascinating thing about this city of 6 towns is not how big it is, but how small. OK, dialect may change, but across the area we have our own vocabulary, our own shared history, and to some extent our own language, both at home and in the workplace.
We call Brown Mine in one part of North Staffordshire, it'd be called Knowles. Of course, this is the coal and the stone has run together, and this way it would be called Ragged Mine and Knowles Coal.
bods it up. Now, a bod of clay is a piece of clay about the size of an apple with a hole. They make a hole in the middle and fill it with coal dust. They make it nice and round, dome-shaped, and it's put on the end of this rod. It's stuck on and he bodies the hole up. He stops this aperture up with the body. But when they get what they call a bossed out, it's when it's been a faulty bod.
Some things where they'd be nash dirt between the roof, and then they'd all that dirt off, you see.
When they put it on the wear and wash it off, it'll come off. If it's too dry, it'll come off. If it's too soft, it'll go all squashy. If it comes off, we'll say it's nash. We call it nash.
Arnold Bennett, that most Stokey of writers, who set many of his novels and short stories in the Potteries, described the area as the biggest village in the world. And he had a point. There is a common culture we all share. Bethesda, Shelton Bar, the Vicky Hall, Oatcakes, Lobby and Pikelets, Smallthorne Roundabouts, Hem Heath, Notties Jeans, the Sentinel, the Whammy, Newcastle I know, Mao Cop, Maxime's, McGuinness's and Pitts Hill Working Men's Club, a seemingly inexhaustible list that you know or you dunna.
It's in a Rudy hat, it's in a Rudy noose. It's what they dust as kinds the most. I'm a Sagger Macca's bottom knocker. Macca's bottom knocker, Sagger Macca's bottom knocker, say. Nobody knocks a bottom quite like a knocker bottom. Sagger Macca's bottom knocker, mate. I rum or I rum, and I dunna give a damn. For right else I could be. Not a navvy, a raggy, nor a mon who claims a lavvy. A Sagger Macca's bottom knocker, mate.
The whole village feel was reinforced for the new station by the Stokeys' initial suspicion of outsiders, especially those with airs and graces. Poet Harry Sylvester from Birches Valley describes a scene.
It was a very cold night in November, and in the pub there were quite a few. It's a night I'll always remember. It was the team's annual do. There was a dart team, the domino team, the crip team, the lot. They're all sitting comfy round their stove pot. Old Joe Rowley just said them a joke, and young Harry Lee loved them more coke. Then through the road he comes a tough. I walks up the bar and takes his gloves off. He said, I'll have lager and lime. I looks at the clock and said, that's the right time. The barman said, being you asked that the clock's 10 minutes fast. Oh, my friend's not here and I'm not late. I'll just stand here and my drink and wait. There's no drinking at the bar, that's a rule. Look round it, on the stool. And there was the tough, holding his glass, saying, excuse me and please let me pass. They were swearing and staring and pushing and shoving through smoke as thick as fog. And he sees a stool, an honest Joe Rowley's dog.
The village feel is most strong in the Stokeys' belief that everybody should know everybody else. Just tell a Stokey you don't know someone and inevitably you'll be told, yes you do. And then some link or story will be found. He's Harry Cartwright's lad. You know, him as had the blind dog that could catch pennies. Everyone is connected if only you try hard enough or look back far enough. Rita Lee! Rita Ryan as was. Anyway, you know Alan Povey? Yes, you do. From Longton. The bloke has told the stories about old Grandad Piggott.
I do. It took a lot to upset little Lizzie Lockett next door but one to us. But this particular instance had really set her off. Hilda Aspinall at the shop told me about it. I says, I stirred. I says, I heard what? I says, Lizzie Lockett's got police on old Piggott next door today. I says, wait, what's happened? Hilda says, well, last Wednesday afternoon, Lizzie invited some women's organisation members down for coffee. And they were sitting in the front room discussing forming a knitting class. I says, and it was cups of tea and fancy cakes and knitting needles 1 minute. Then all of a sudden, this vile language started floating in through the window. I started laughing, I did, I couldn't help it. Lizzie says, there was somebody out in the street standing under the gas lamp and they want a half churning it out. It wasn't just ordinary swearing, I says, it was worse than that, a lot worse. Whoever it was coming out with just about every foul word as has ever been invented. I says it was pit language, it was fish market language, dockers language, all held into one, I says, with a bit more added. They could tell how bad it was, I says. Mrs. Parker Jarvis fainted, and so did Felicity Beeston. Lizzie swears as it was old Piggott and has got bobbies on him. Poor old Lizzie, I thought. I'd joined this organisation. It was a bit high to the depth. They were all well off apart from Lizzie. They all lived in big detached houses, far away from the terrace straight as Lizzie lived in. Well, fortunately, it didn't happen very often as they met at Lizzie's. When they did, a man to usually get Perce out of the road, shift his teeth off mantel shelf, clean up a bit and put a reasonable show on. It seemed a cruel stroke of fate, as old Grandad Pigott should have a cossing session under Lizzie's gas lamp that very afternoon.
Old Grandad Pigott is a must for anyone who has a love for the little world that exists in this city of 250,000 souls. Now, Old Grandad Pigott may be a fictional creation, but his success is down to how authentic he is. The language, stories and characters are drawn from real life, just like Tommy Skeed and Kent's Garden.
There was Tommy Rock, Tommy Skeed, Ern Major, White Called him Bone Drunk, and Jack Major. I was the 8 can. They were 2 brothers. They went in the army together in 1915, the week after the weeks. Well, they had this bet for a tanner, and Tommy Rock and Tommy Skeed must carry 1,000 bricks on 3 cups, not more than 3 cups of cowed water.
If you don't know Tommy Skeed, there'll always be new characters and new tales to tell. In fact, tall, storied merchant Tommy Skeed may well have a natural successor from amongst my own friends. Step forward fairy tale Phil Allen from Biddulph, who spent his early 20s carrying a Bible to swear on so people would believe his stories. There's precious little explanation in these stories. If you're from Stoke and you're old enough, you're meant to know. John Levitt wasn't and didn't. So like those early Radio Stoke pioneers, he had to go and find out.
Tommy Skeed was a real person. More than that, he's something of a folk hero. He seems to have been one of those geniuses who make a fine art out of telling tall stories. His real name was Thomas Heath. They called him Skeed because he was left-handed. He lived in John Street in Normacott.
And Kent's Garden?
Kent's Garden is Hanley Cemetery. Most older people will know this. The name commemorates the first superintendent of Hanley Park, who was also the registrar of the cemetery. He was called Joseph Kent.
So, Tommy Skeed and Kent's Garden, 2 references now almost lost to us. But that's as it should be.
Oh, I grew up, I became a man. Mentally was good for me, but I was moving on. Hey up, mother, how are you? I'm doing fine. Never mind what time it is, put our kid on the line. Hey up, I do, how at, how rate, how's the wife, okay. We're it off to, I'm getting warm, I've just been out to say. Oh, hey up, I do, how at, how rate, Scott time sinking jar. Do not think so, mommy, not today, I'll say thee then, ta-ra.
Not only is the culture and language of the area complex, it's also constantly changing. Although, of course, some things endure.
May I have oatcakes and cheese, please?
Radio Stoke were quick to realise that what goes into the listener's mouth is often as important as what comes out. And oatcakes are something that the student of Stoke-on-Trent learns about on day 1 of their introduction to the city. Like some storybook Victorian visitor to the African interior, they are worshipped, revered, and eventually eaten. Stoke-on-Trent poet and artist Arthur Berry gets the gastric juices flowing.
Let us pay homage to the oat cake, or oot cake, or wood cake, as the old men called them. The oat cake is not a cake at all, really, not like the fairy cake or the Eccles cake, not a cake in that way, more of a pottery's papadum, a sort of Tunstall tortilla, a clay Suzette, as flat and thin as a dishcloth, an obedient and suppliant cheek that will bend any way you want it. Round and floppy, the oat cake has a texture similar to the skins of old colliers or men dying of potter's rot. These are not cakes made for every day and should only be eaten twice or at the most 3 times a week, preferably at weekends when you are flush and filled with drink or the prospect of drink. Such richness every day would be...
Oh, another word on Arnold Bennett, by the way, and one to fill the heart with pride. He ended up living in France, but every Friday, without fail, he'd have a dozen oatcakes dispatched by rail and sea, so he could say at Saturday breakfast, "Hey, you can stuff your crock, monsieur, I've got oatcakes." The buying of oatcakes has a ritual to it. We may take many years finding our own favourite shop, developing our own individual fillings, and as for serving, the rolled, the flat, the doubles, the singles, well, each method is sacrosanct to each individual. But get them we must. Alfred Harrison of High Street, Silverdale.
People come here every Sunday morning from Clayton, Trent Vale, Beckley, Madeley, Rhinell, Almer End. There's one chap from the Offaly Arms, Beckley. He's been coming here 10 years. Every Sunday or Saturday he's here for his oatcakes, every Saturday. He passes 2 oatcake shops to come here.
See? Even a 12-minute journey from Beckley to Silverdale can't separate an oatcake lover from his prey. Personally, it's never even crossed my mind what's in an oatcake. Although I have seen one made. A mate of mine cobbled one together on Christmas Day in Melbourne to starve off the homesickness. But the good news is, they're not even that bad for you, as Jeff Shaw of S&G Oatcakes explains.
Well, there are no E-numbers, no pink colourings, no additives, no preservatives. They're baked fresh 7 days a week, so it is catered for the vegetarian market. It's healthy eating, and it keeps longer than bread and all. The ingredients: oatmeal, flour, sodium bicarbonate, salt, and yeast. And there's, like I said, it's 7 days a week, baked fresh every day. When everybody else is fast asleep in bed, we're here baking away.
My mother would never talk of cooking oatcakes. They don't need cooking, they need warming through. Not too far from Silverdale herself, she doesn't go as far as Alfred, but we've always had tin plates.
A lot of people stick them in the oven, which is all wrong. To warm oatcakes, you're supposed to put a saucepan half full of boiling water on your stove. Put your oatcakes in on a lid, or an enamel plate. Enamel plate's best because the heat goes through quick. And put a thick plate on the top. Now you're trapped inside. The heat gets the thick plate and it doesn't go out and it comes back onto the oatcakes. Then 10 minutes you've got, well, less than 10 minutes, you've got oatcakes you can't tell when they come off the stove.
The oatcake could easily take up a programme in itself, and in fact on Radio Stoke often has done. But there is good reason. The oatcake cannot be separated from the Stokey, or indeed the Stokey from his oatcake.
Every holiday time, Christmas, Easter, Whit, bank holidays, people come to Silverdale, who've actually moved up to Silverdale, and they take 5 or 6 dozen oatcakes back with them. They deep freeze them now, you know. Several hotels come to me from Blackpool. People got a boarding house. This week they've gone down to Lincoln, Torquay. I think the wife sent some to South Wales. But they're ex-pottery people, you know, and they still take them, they still come here. And if people off Silverdale, or nothing all round here, they take them when they go on their holidays. Else they can't have their holiday if they don't take their oatcakes.
But why? Why this obsession? Well, maybe the answer lies in the lost knowledge of the past.
Well, they say they're aphrodisiacs, is that what they call it? But I don't know. But I eat quite a few myself. I love them.
So does it work?
Well, I don't know. I'm on my own at the moment. I'm looking for a toy boy.
And oatcakes are going to help you along the way, are they?
Well, I'm hoping they will. And then again, if I give me toy boy half a dozen oatcakes, you never know what'll happen, do you?
Oh, I love her. And that's why Silvio Berlusconi eats so many oatcakes. We take leave of the oatcake, still in seductive mood, but with a note of caution from Arthur Berry.
The pikelet, you ask? What's that? It's a sort of female oatcake. Smaller, thicker, sweeter, more immediately seductive, sometimes with currants in it. A muffin for the lumpen working class, best eaten soaked in butter or marge. If overindulged in, both these cakes can play the very devil with your waistline. I must warn, indulgence leads to bulgence.
Oh, our waistlines are constantly under attack, and if it isn't one end of the day, it's the other. Oatcakes for breakfast, but for tea, especially for the underpaid working man in search of a treat, it had to be chips.
I have never tasted anything nicer in this world. One of the finest dishes you can eat. Whole generations have been reared on them. Big families of great hulking youths have grown strong in their lives on a diet of chips. And poor thin dappled-legged sluts with a house full of babbies and a fag always in their mouths have been able to manage day after day because there's been a chip shop in the street. They're a very cultured thing as well, if it comes to that, chips. There should, in fact, be a monument to the chip, a monument as big as a pit chimney. See, for instance, a 40-foot concrete effigy of a chip fixed to the top of some disused factory chimney. That's what's needed to put this district on the map.
I remember with pride the Sentinel having a promotion. Free bag of chips with every copy. And Radio Stoke too respected the humble chip and ran a kind of Miss World chip competition in the early 70s.
Now let's get on to this survey of massive public importance. Let's first of all look at value for money for our fish. The best value here was at the Golden Place in Etruria, where for 10p we got a total fish lot weighing 6.5 ounces.
And now for the chips. For 5p at Town Road Fisheries in Hanley, we got more chips per penny than anywhere else we tried. We think we ought to mention S. Lowe's at 4 Green Road, Smallthorne. Here we got 5.75 ounces of chips for 5p.
Of course, it might be that even though you quite like chips, what really turns you on is the tiny bits of chips, referred to variously as scrumpy, scratchings, scraps, crisps, or simply bits. If these are what turn you on, then make haste to either Jackson's Seafood in Cheapside, Hanley, or the Goldfish Bowl in Goodson Street, Hanley, or Town Road Fisheries in Town Road, Hanley. So Hanley wins hands down for scratchings, if you see what I mean.
To wrap up this report, we shouldn't overlook how the fish and chips were finally wrapped up. Most opted for the Evening Sentinel newspaper, 2 others wrapped them in white paper, but Fred's fish and chip shop in High Street, Tunstall went one better because his were wrapped in the Financial Times.
Chips are, of course, not a particularly regional thing. Unlike lobby, food of poets. Well, Michaela Warrilow anyway, with the wonderful Fat Emma's Lobby.
By God, it were good. That Fat Emma's stuff. 7p a bowl, and one were enough. Bucket of pot herbs, carrots and swedes, dried peas, lentils and pearl barley seeds, splitted sheep's head, onions chopped small, lump of pig's lard, and waiter, that's all. Heaped in a kettle that stood on the hob, brewing and bubbling, awaiting the mob. At 12, Dalton's whistle would blow the noon stop, the start of a race for the lads of our shop. With aprons rolled up and caps down tight, it were each for himself in a rush for a bite. We'd pound up the street to Fat Emma's shop, where that huge woman reigned in starch-stiffened slop. 1 lobby, Emma, 2 Emma for me. I'm Fost, serve me. We'd hold up our bowls like clayey young twists to Fat Emma wreathed in lobby steam mists. By God, it were good, that Fat Emma's stuff. Plenty of meat and broth to dip up. You could keep hung game and pullets in wine. That's stuff for the rear, not troops in the line. Lobby, Fat Emma's, dear loved by our folk. From the city of pots, a dish from Stoke.
Now, fittingly for the final food item, it's a local dish you'd have for dessert, or afters. Mrs. Mary Bluff of Longnaw describes it.
It's a layer of pastry, a good pastry made with half flour and lard and a small half teaspoonful of salt, and then a layer of damson jam on the pastry, and then all the bits of pastry cut across and made to look artistic with the bits of pastry of all shapes and sizes, I should say, and then after that nickel it round with the fork on the edge of the plate and bake in a good oven, hot oven, for about 10 minutes until it's a nice brown.
That was the fast disappearing Tantadlin tart, as yet untasted by me. If the knowledge is still out there, I'd love to try it, just once, before I die. Central though food is to gaining a little understanding of North Staffordshire, it is only the second most important item on the table when one of us ventures out to eat. It is as close a thing to instinctive as you can get for the local man or woman, upon sitting down in a cafe or restaurant, to immediately upend the china and check where it was made and who by. It is the secret code, the flower in the buttonhole, the Masonic handshake of Stokies across the globe.
If I'm at a car boot, anything, I'll always, even if I'm in somebody's house, I will turn it round and have a look, see if it's potteries like, you know.
Only when we're on holiday we might do.
I worked in pots. I used to years ago, you know, some talking about 50 years ago. Have a look at them, say where they were made and whose stamp was on them. Say if they were from potteries, and 9 times out of 10 they were always from potteries.
This, I imagine, will never change. But in saying that, I remember the fate of the Tantadlin tart and despair. Change is something that's forever being forced on the people of North Staffordshire and South Cheshire, from the closing down of places of work, the building of roads and clearances of housing, great civil engineering projects and tiny failed enterprises. We move forward with cleaner air, but always we look back with affection, because the place is indivisible from the people and their memories.
As a little lad, I was always playing down the backs. And somewhere inside me, I've been playing down the backs ever since. Backs are the backs of streets. Only terrace houses or old tunnel backs have them. And all the backs have little water closets and coal holes. And all the way down to the end of the street, you can see these little coal holes and lavatories disappearing into the distance. Some of these alleys are cobbles and some have been covered in asphalt, but many are just flattened and uneven earth. But outside most folks' back gates, you'll find that they are generally either put a bit of concrete or tarmac or built a surface out of the ages of ashes spread day after day for years and years. To be a child and reared in these was to be born lucky, and I don't know any better way of beginning to discover the big world outside your own back gate than to join one of the gangs of scabby-kneed kids that lived and hunted down these backs.
Arthur Berry, capturing the sheer excitement of childhood and home. The loss of the terrace and the introduction of high-rises is seen today from a long perspective as only partially successful. But at the time, there was quite a measure of optimism alongside the scepticism.
And the last few years have seen a few of the rows disappear. Whole new areas have been opened up. There's no doubt about it that some new answers have got to be found. The new bathrooms and additions to the old terraced houses might see us through the next few years, but then what? I asked people who lived near to places where rapid change was taking place about this.
Well, I'm thinking nice for the older people, you know.
I wouldn't have one if you give me one.
They're lovely. Smashing. When you live in one of these and you come for go in one of these, ooh, beautiful.
They've finished it off well.
Because I don't think they've got much space in flats at all.
Oh, beautiful, I do. I wish I could get one.
All boxed up too close kind of a thing. I've been up these.
When they knock the houses down at the bottom, you know, and get these other new ones up all round here, it look much different. You won't be able to tell Stoke-on-Trent.
Some have endured great hardship, having been moved across the city, although you'd be forgiven for thinking it was the other side of the world. In a village, of course, and I still agree with Arnold Bennett that this area is a village, small changes feel drastic, especially if they involve home. The BBC bods must have really struggled. Those who don't have the city-village mentality could never understand the sheer trauma of moving to somewhere that seems just down the road. But when you know a place intimately, every yard is 100 miles. From New York to LA, from Normacott to Bentley.
Oh, I was shattered. After living in a close community like Normacott, with family close too, I remember the first night I spent in this house where I am now, and I thought, oh, I'm miles away from everywhere. It was sort of uncivilised. There were so many houses.
The BBC quickly learned that this is not parochial. It's just who we are and how we know each other. Ask a stranger how far Florence is from Dresden, and if they say it's 688 miles, then they're not from Stoke. It may have taken 50 years, but the people at BBC Radio Stoke know the answer. It's 1.1 miles.
Hey-oh, I do. How at? A rate. How's the way? OK. Where it off to? Hunging warm. Just been I just say. Oh. Hey-oh, I do. How at? A rate. Scott Tam sink a jar. Don't think so, Marmee? Not today. I'll say the ta-ra.